But what I'll do before we get started in the Q&A, I want to introduce myself. I know I've met most of y'all today. For some of you that I haven't met, my name is Lucas Fertitta. I'm the Director of Acquisitions for Three Pillars Capital Group. My sole job in this company is to bring these off-market opportunities to George and Josh so we can own them, operate them efficiently, and more importantly, give you guys a return on your investment. So before we get started, I want to introduce the speakers from your left to right. First, we got Josh Welch, the founder and managing principal of Three Pillars. Then we've got Derek Fasulo, vice president of CBRE Capital Markets. And then Jason Nybakken, insurance professional at IBC Insurance. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So this first question is basically for everyone across the board, but we're going to start off with Derek. Derek, tell us about your professional background and your business niche.
Sure. So I work for CBRE here in the Houston office on our debt team. I've been with CBRE for 8-9 years now. I started out in the appraisal group, kind of valuing properties, learning, the market research, just kind of the ground up nuts and bolts of real estate. I did that for 3 years and transferred into our debt group, where now I focus on multifamily sourcing debt through a variety of lenders for multifamily acquisitions, refinances, and development deals as well.
Great. And then Jason, same question. Tell us about your professional background and your business niche.
Yeah, my professional background actually begins with a 12-year teaching career in high school. So I did that, moved out of that into insurance, and I've been doing that for about 5 years now. Been to a bunch of schooling, got a bunch of designations and all that jazz, teacher mentality. Basically, a lot of my clients, most of them are in the Houston and Texas area. I do some stuff in Oklahoma, but we have reaches all across the United States. Primarily, probably the majority of my book of business is split between apartments and shopping centers. But I have a variety of other business policies for a variety of clients as well.
Very good. And then you, Josh, same question. Tell us about your professional background and business niche.
All right. Well, hopefully a lot of you guys know who I am already. Josh Welch. My business background, I'm an engineer by heart, so I went to school for that. Started my career, in corporate as an engineer. But along the way, real estate's always been on my mind. It's always been a passion. I started out single-family rentals, built it up for quite a while, and then the light bulb. And I've told you this a lot of you guys the story. The light bulb for me went off when I realized to scale and really get to where I wanted to be in real estate. It was through multifamily. So when I realized that vision, I kind of took off in that direction. So formed Three Pillars, and we are focused on in Houston here on Class C and B value-add assets. And a lot of you have already toured one of our acquisitions we did back in May, so you kind of saw what we look for in a property. We talked a little bit about the rents that we're achieving, the upgrades, the amenities that we do in our units. So hopefully you guys got a lot of value from that. But yeah, that's what we do.
Very good, very good. So here are the next group of questions. This is for Jason. What is IBC's edge over other insurance firms?
Yeah, so there are a lot of really good insurance agencies in Houston and probably all over the country. I would say that IBC Insurance, one of our big deals is that we're kind of act like a small shop. I'm heavily involved not only on the front lines talking to clients, but also I do a lot of the marketing to the carriers and negotiating the deals. So I'm very familiar with the majority of the accounts that I work with. I'm also involved in renewals, and I kind of caveat that with the fact that we have access to the biggest brokers in the United States. So we can operate like a small shop, but still have access to all the carriers so that I'm able to write all the policies that I need to write. And so I would say that the service is vastly improved, and the consultative part of our agency is something that I think is a pretty good value.
Very good. All right. So for Derek, what is CBRE's edge over other mortgage broking firms?
Sure. So CBRE, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of it. We're the largest commercial real estate servicing company in the world. We have offices in every major city across the world. And we are really and truly the only 360 platform. And what I mean by that is we have an investment sales team, we have a debt team, and for multifamily, we have appraisal, property condition guys. So we can literally, especially on agency deals, handle a process from start to beginning, from start to end. So we sign up deals. We can hire our own appraisals to do them, our own appraisers to do the appraisals. We can hire property condition guys. So we have the ability to keep everything in-house. We also have a servicing group to service our loan on agency deals, and our servicing group sits here in Houston. Our underwriters that underwrite our deals for agency sit here in Houston as well. And we have one of the largest research teams with research specialists in every major market. So what that translates to is you come to me and we can do everything for you kind of in-house. And so what that has led to in success is that we're the number one Freddie lender. We are the number one Freddie small balance lender, and we're the number three Fannie lender. We've been the number one Freddie lender for the past 10 years. And so we do more business than anyone else on that side of the business. And so that enables us to kind of be the number one guys in any market that we work in, so across the United States.
Thank you. All right, Josh, how do you differentiate yourself and team with other private equity firms in Houston, and how do you see yourself above the rest of the competition?
Great question. So, we are, we're very focused on the quality of our operations. We have everything is in-house for us. So we're vertically integrated. And what I mean by that is, a lot of owner-operators will, hire third-party management companies. They'll contract a lot of things out. We strive very hard to bring all that in-house because by controlling the quality of operations, you can 99% of the time control your bottom line and your operating expense ratio, which for us translates into optimum return for investors. So by focusing on that and really getting that part right and making sure we're delivering the highest quality in our operations, we have an amazing edge over a lot of our competitors in this market. I would say that's probably one of the greatest things we own.
All right, Derek, this is for you. So how much capital, is actually a three-part question, but I'll make it slow and easy.
Sure.
How much capital did CBRE originate in 2017? Are you on track to beat it that year? And what's the percentage of that being multifamily?
Sure. So last year, our Houston office did $2.2 billion. Of that, $650 million was multifamily. We have probably the number one senior housing guy in the entire nation that sits in Houston, and he did almost $1 billion himself. So that took a pretty good chunk out of that. This year, we have already done $2.4 billion. We have another $1 billion in closing that is scheduled to close before the end of the year, so we should end up around $3.5 billion total. We have already doubled our multifamily. We've done $1.2 billion so far this year in multifamily, and we'll probably end somewhere around $1.5 billion.
Impressive. Okay, Jason, how many multifamily units would you say that you guys cover right now, and how wide is your reach across the United States?
Yeah, so we have producers kind of all over South Texas and San Antonio and here in Houston. It's hard to say how many. I mean, numbers in the thousands, I would say. Just because I got guys that down in Corpus. I got a guy in Brownsville that's doing a lot of work, and we have people here in Houston that are also doing it. But we do deals. I mean, right now I'm quoting a couple of apartment complexes in Denver, Colorado. So we have the ability to reach out to different states. I would say, though, that the majority of our property insurance is kind of in the Texas area and then all along the Gulf Coast. High hazard areas that are catastrophic in nature, just because there's an expertise to that type of insurance that isn't evident when you're doing something in Wyoming. So I would say that we can write anywhere, but we usually write in Texas.
I like it. Okay. Questions for Josh. Over the last year, what have you seen in the market as for property values, and how are you able to make sense of it in your underwriting?
Well, I mean, it's no secret. Everybody's seeing across the country, cap rate compression. Markets here locally, Dallas, Austin especially, super competitive, right? Money's got to flow somewhere. So, we're seeing a lot of that flow into Houston. That's why I think we're really set up for a great next couple of years and beyond. So, there's no secret behind that. As far as making sense of these deals and underwriting, every owner operator has to run the property as they would run it. So when you look at, when we look at a T12 and I'm looking at expense breakdown sent to me from the seller, first thing I think about, okay, where are the inefficiencies at? And how would I be able to take this over and how would my team operate this? And so that's a lot of the time is a night and day difference between how we can take something and run it way different and make a deal that wouldn't make sense to some guys and it would make complete sense to us. Just because of the way that we'd run it. So we have a very unique way of how we, our analysis and our strategy to do that. But like I said earlier, our cost reduction strategies, how we bring everything in-house, how we're sticklers on that. That's really, a way that we make, how we make our underwriting work where a lot of guys can't.
Good. All right, this question's for Derek. So what do you see the common reasons that properties deals fall through? And based on those, what can be done to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I would say it's the capital stack, it's the debt and the equity. It's, on the equity side, it's, raising capital and having someone pull out kind of towards the end of the deal, and then you're kind of stuck last minute scrambling for equity. On the debt side, it's individuals who try to go to a local bank, and for whatever reason, banks kind of have the strategy where they'll sign up a deal and issue a term sheet, and then they'll put it into committee and order third parties. Well, one committee member votes it down, they can cancel the deal completely, and then you're kind of stuck scrambling to try to place debt, in 30 days before closing. So I would say the capital, the debt and equity aspect of it, not being able to get to where you need to be to make the deal work for you.
Very good. Okay, Jason, tell us about some of the more complex deals that you've originated that involved a lot of creativity.
Yeah, I'm thinking a couple come to mind. I worked with a colleague on a deal. It was a mixed-use deal in Houston. Had about 400 units. Had about 30,000 square feet of retail, and then a pretty large parking garage to handle all those tenants. The interesting thing about that was that, and we were fortunate that we were also doing the builder's risk policy, and for those of you that are building, there are certain trigger points in a builder's risk where the coverage just ceases. And so we had to situate our property policies so that each time something came off the builder's risk, the policy would take it over. And so that required some manuscripting for the underwriters to actually manuscript the policy and change the policy as it was written. And so we had to do that so that when the parking garage was done, then it automatically moved over. So that when the units were done, then they were moved over on there, but the retail was still getting built out. So there were several sequences there, and if you mess that up and something rolls through here in the middle of hurricane season, then you could think you're covered, but then you weren't. And then, a lot of the complex deals, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Derek, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have requirements that, traditional banks, community banks will not have. And so if you have a very old apartment complex that maybe hasn't been updated, trying to secure the carriers to actually write that insurance when, for example, in this Denver deal, it's a 1921 building and it still has fuses for electrical, and they want ordinance or law coverage. They want all these things on here, and the carriers are going, "Are you kidding me? This thing's like 100 years old. You're crazy?" So having to convince and get those deals done at a rate that that you guys are going to love, sometimes those are some pretty big hurdles.
I like it. Okay, for Josh, what are some of the common traits of mismanaged value-added properties that you have witnessed on some of the deals you've taken over?
That's a fun one. So we see a lot of mismanagement, and it comes in all different shapes and forms. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in Class C. Deal values anywhere between 3 and 10 million. But a lot of times, what you see in some of those kind of the 3 to 10 million spaces, you don't have a lot of institutional capital yet. So you're taking properties over that were either in the family or some type of a smaller group of investors where maybe the sophistication level is a little bit lower. So a great example is a property that we just closed on yesterday. For those of you that know about it, it's called Inwood Meadows. We renamed it to Lasso and Risa Apartments, and that's to kind of go. I won't go on a tangent, but that's for the demographic we're going after. So we renamed it. But when we got the original T12, it was literally on a piece of paper and it was handwritten. And not only that, but the rent roll was handwritten on a piece of paper, and he had written lines as if it was in a grid, so you could see like unit, 92.3A, was this much per month. And we had to translate that month by month as we were going through the process. We translate that into Excel and then send that to, our lender at the time. That right there is a hallmark. It's anything on the back of a napkin. It's a hallmark of mismanagement, and you do still find those. And what the characteristics are these: bloated expenses, just not sophisticated in the management, getting taken advantage of with contractors, rents that are super below market, outdated units. So I guess word for the wise: if you ever come across a deal and the first thing you get is something on the back of a napkin, go after it, hard force, because there's going to be some mismanagement there.
I like the answer. Thank you. All right, for Derek. Now, CBRE is a national firm. How does the appetite for Houston compare to How does the appetite for Houston deals compare to what the firm is working on in other locations, such as Texas or the United States?
Yeah, I would say the appetite is strong. We had a little mini recession a couple years ago due to the oil. You saw a few lenders kind of pull back. The agencies, being Freddie and Fannie, in most markets, they'll have a 125 coverage. At that time, on a lot of deals, they had pushed the coverage up to actually a 130. So naturally, debt was a little bit harder to get to at where you wanted to see at 75%. Since Harvey, you kind of saw an overnight acceleration of the market, which is the only silver lining from that storm. But you saw a lot of absorption happen pretty quickly, and then over the past year, you've seen a lot of rent growth. So you have seen lenders and investors become very interested in Houston again, especially with the lack of supply, which we can talk about a little bit later, the lack of supply in Houston. So I'd say it's very strong. Austin is obviously incredibly strong, given all its demographics and growth, Dallas as well, and even San Antonio for that fact. So it's very good compared to other markets. Lenders naturally, a lot of them sit up in the Northeast or on the West Coast, so they're obviously biased to the gateway markets. Your New Yorks, your West Coast, your LAs, your Atlantas, your Denvers. They all focus on those and love those types. But I think Houston has made a name for itself, and people have realized that there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of returns. And part of that is due to all the population and employment growth that we've seen over the past couple years, and that we're projected to see over the next few years. So it's very strong.
All right, very good. Now, this next question, for those of you that live in Houston, this may be personal, but with Harvey being over a year now, for Jason, this question's for Jason. With Harvey being over a year now, are you still seeing operators getting flood insurance when it's optional?
Yeah, that's an interesting deal. I found a lot of operators that went through Harvey and were not flooded. Were like, I made it through Harvey and I'm not flooded, so why would I get flood insurance? Some did pick it up after the fact. I don't see a lot of when they're not in a 100-year floodplain, or when they're beyond the 100-year floodplain. I'm not seeing a lot of operators get flood insurance. Now, for those that have to get it, they're in a flood zone that requires it. Obviously, the lender's going to require it. I have seen that there are markets out there beyond the National Flood Insurance Program that are very competitive. So, if you, especially on larger projects in flood zones, we work with a private market, and not all the time, but sometimes you see significant savings on your flood insurance by going to the private market. And these are A-rated carriers. These are carriers that can provide replacement cost on contents if you need it, which you can't get through the National Flood Insurance Program. And if anybody in here went through NFIP claims, sometimes they were pretty darn slow, and you're probably going to get a little better service from a private deal. So, but no, I haven't seen a lot of. If it's not required, margins are tight. We're looking for value add here. I don't see a lot buying.
Very good. Okay. questions for you, Josh. Someone actively buying properties. What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome on your first couple of deals?
We have a pretty solid network of our of investors that we raise capital from here in Houston. But in the beginning, it doesn't mean it was easy. So, raising equity on your first couple of deals without a track record and credibility, it still can be challenging. We've overcome those. One thing too, it's more along what I've already kind of been speaking on tonight is, realigning expectations to what the submarket actually is. So you might go into a deal thinking that, okay, this is what I'm going to allocate for this, and I'm going to allocate my budget for this. In reality, maybe that's too high or too low, but until you actually operate a property in that submarket, you won't know. Other things too, like leasing. There's certain things that with our leasing strategy, some things that work that we try in the beginning, and some things that just don't work at all. But until you get in there and you try it and you experiment, those are challenges. And so I think really overcoming the expectations of assumptions and what reality says is tough.
Okay, very good. So Derek, CBRE offers a lot of lending options. We've got non-recourse, recourse, bridge, perm, and I think the most attractive debt out there is non-recourse. But for some of those who, less experienced investors that cannot get the non-recourse option, what are some other types or structures of other non-recourse or non-agency debt that CBRE can offer to some of these people?
Sure. So as you just mentioned, agency non-recourse debt is obviously preferred. I will say on Freddie small balance loans, which those of you who aren't familiar, the loans ranging from $1 to $7.5 million, and it's been a very high producing product for them. They introduced this about 3 to 4 years ago, and they're doing extremely well with it. And I will say on that particular program, it's kind of geared towards first-time buyers. I've closed a lot of deals with guys who had never purchased a property or owned real estate before, and you get away with that by having a great property manager in place. So they are open to you buying a property because that's what the product is geared for, and putting an experienced property manager in place, and they will absolutely do that deal for you. I will say that it's other non-traditional kind of lenders out there are the debt funds, and those guys are extremely aggressive. These are private. It's private capital that is raised by an institution that goes out and raises money from private high net worth individuals, and they go and lend it out. And they do traditionally bridge loans, so 3-year interest only loans, particularly geared towards value add properties. And so that has been a huge component of the lending market that you didn't see 10 years ago, and even over the past 3 or 4 years has become highly competitive, and there's just a ton of capital in that space. The only issue you may see with that is they typically don't go below $5 million. So if you have a deal above that, they offer very competitive spreads. They offer interest-only loans on a non-recourse basis. So it's a great product for individuals buying properties in the value-add space.
Thank you. All right, so this is the last question for everyone. I'll start off with Jason. What's your outlook for multifamily insurance premium costs over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, so, the market fared pretty good after Harvey, to be honest with you. That was largely a flood event. So, I'm seeing on my renewals, not a lot of changes in the property rates. And, as you may well know, they're highly dependent on catastrophic losses. So Florence may have some impact on them, although that's largely a flood event as well. But I see, as long as we don't have any huge losses, any massive types of losses in the marketplace for multifamily, I don't see a lot of changes in the market. There may be some small increases here and there, but as long as we don't have a really large hurricane coming and cause a lot of wind damage, for example, then I think we can look at. And by the way, in the last 5 or 6 years, rates have been going down, at least in the Houston area. All the way from Ike. They peaked up, they were pretty high, and they've been going down. Now they kind of are flat this year. So they're in a good place compared to where the market has been.
Okay, very good. Now, Josh, where do you see your company growing a year from now?
Well, we want to own all of Houston. That'd be great. Just kidding. No, but we're aggressively buying. We're in acquisition mode. I mean, this is what we do every day, for fun even. So I mean, we just want to continue growing and scaling, and really just building out the best company that we can, and everything that is involved with that, the vertical integration side. Our property management company is Greenline Management, so really placing an emphasis on making the operations as streamlined as possible so that we can continue to scale as quickly as we can. I would like to see, 8 to even 9-digit portfolio valuations by next year. So that's kind of where we're heading, but just keep growing and keep pushing really hard.
Very good. And the final question, Derek. What is your outlook on new supply coming in line over the next few years, and will this hurt or help Class C operators?
Sure. So I think in Houston, it's only good news for Houston over the next few years. To date, we have delivered roughly 7,000 units in Houston, with about 5,000 more delivered at the end of the year. Next year, we have 5,000 total. The year after that, 1,000, and the following year, 300 units. So we have a very diminishing pipeline over the next 3 years, which only bodes well for the Houston market in creating rent growth, coupled with population growth, employment growth. So you have a lot of people coming in, a lot of demand, and not a lot of new supply hitting Houston's market. Part of that is you're not seeing a whole lot of construction debt and equity available. The only people getting those deals done are institutional guys like an Alliance Group or a Camden Property Group. Camden has one deal going on downtown. Alliance has a couple out in Katy. You're not seeing a whole lot else. I think they have a deal in the Heights. Alliance has a deal growing up in the Heights as well. So that's about it. And so as far as the Class C market is concerned, our research group actually put out an article 2 days ago. And this is kind of nationwide, but I think it speaks particularly to Houston, just given the amount of workforce housing we have, is that out of all the asset classes, A, B, and C, C has the lowest vacancy rate and the highest rent growth. And that is particularly garden-style C properties across the nation, particularly into Houston. Part of that is a couple years ago, you saw a ton of supply coming on the Houston market. And with that, you saw a small recession. So you had little demand, a lot of supply coming on. What that did was force your Class A apartments to reduce their rent and increase their concessions. Well, that decreased the spread between the B rents and the A rents. So you had a lot of B guys moving into A properties. And so that hurt the B market, but the spread between the B and the C was so far that the guys in the C stayed there. That market was unchanged over the past couple of years, and actually has experienced rent growth over the past couple of years while the A and B market suffered. And so I think the C workforce housing, especially in Houston, is the best type of product to invest to, especially on the value add side. And so I think, especially over the next few years with the lack of supply, it's only going to be good news for Houston.
Love it. Powerful answer. Enjoyed it. Well, everyone, that concludes to our presentation. What we'll do now is we're gonna finish everything, and if you want to talk to us offline, more questions, or the rest of the speakers, you're more to do so. But thanks again for coming out. Have a good evening.